I will admit freely and without embarrassment that I first noticed Miss Elspeth Crane because she argued with me. This is not, I understand, the conventional way these accounts are supposed to begin. The conventional beginning involves a ballroom and a gown and the cruelty of the assembled. I have written one of those accounts already, and it was true, and this account is equally true, and in this one the ballroom does not appear for some pages. In this one, the setting is the estate accounts room at Hartwell on a Tuesday morning in April, and the woman who would eventually become my Duchess was standing across the desk from me with an error ledger in her hand and the expression of someone who has found 3 discrepancies and is prepared to discuss all of them at length. Miss Crane was the daughter of my steward, Josiah Crane, who had served the estate for 20 years and was, by the time of this account, in the 2nd year of a chest complaint that kept him largely confined to his cottage. She had taken over the greater part of the accounts work herself with a thoroughness that I had, until the Tuesday in question, noticed only in the abstract. The ledgers were correct, the tallies balanced, the quarterly summaries arrived on time. I had not met her precisely, though I knew her name. The estate ran. I was occupied elsewhere. On the Tuesday she appeared in the accounts room, my accounts room, at the primary house, with the current quarter's ledger and the previous quarter's comparison sheet, and she informed my secretary, a mild man named Pell, that she required 20 minutes with the Duke at his earliest convenience. Pell came to find me in the library, he said. In the careful tone he is uncertain how I will respond to something. Miss Crane is here, Your Grace, Josiah's daughter. She has the ledger. I said, send her in. She was perhaps 24, with dark hair pulled back very practically and the kind of direct eyes that assess a room before they settle. She wore a plain gray dress, the dress of a working woman, not a caller, and she carried the ledger the way someone carries something they have already read 3 times and know well. She gave me a correct curtsy, and then, with the efficiency of a person who has 20 minutes and intends to use them, she opened the ledger to the relevant page. She said, there is a discrepancy in the March timber account, Your Grace. The delivery was logged at 14 cords, but I have the carver invoice showing 11 and a note from the yard that the remaining 3 were diverted to the East Cottage repairs, which are under the household account, not the timber account. The timber account has been overcharged by 3 cords at the March rate. I looked at the ledger. I said, so it has, she said. Additionally, the February grain settlement shows a penalty fee that doesn't match the contract terms. The contract specifies a grace period of 14 days. The settlement was applied at 11. The overpayment is 11 shillings, I said. You've been through the contracts, she said. I manage the accounts for the whole estate, Your Grace. I go through everything. There was a pause. I looked at her, and she looked at me with the steady, unimpressed directness of someone who is entirely unintimidated by the setting and has not budgeted time for being so. I said, sit down, Miss Crane. She sat. She set the ledger on the desk between us with the markers already in at the relevant pages, which told me she had anticipated a longer conversation than she had asked Pell for. For the next half hour, not 20 minutes, we went through the discrepancies, all 3 of them. She had notes on each one, the relevant contracts, and in one case, a previous year's comparison that showed the error had occurred before and been caught and then allowed to drift back in. She explained each one clearly and waited for my response before proceeding to the next, which is the correct way to have an accounts discussion, but is not, in my experience, common. At the end of the half hour, I said, you have found 11 shillings of overpayment, a 3-cord misallocation, and a recurring ledger drift that's been here since the old head of accounts. That is a morning's work in an accounts room that is not your accounts room, she said. My father taught me that a discrepancy that's allowed to sit becomes a habit. I said, your father is a good man, she said. He is. I would like to keep his position open for him when his health returns. She said it plainly, without making it a plea. It was a statement of intent, and also I understood the reason she had come. Not only the accounts, but the position. She was showing me what she could do, so that when the question came, the answer would already be known. I looked at her for a moment. She met my gaze with the equanimity of someone who has prepared for both outcomes and is at peace with either. I said, your father's position is not at risk, Miss Crane. I had not considered removing him. A small pause. Then she said, I had not assumed you had, but I had not assumed you hadn't either. I found this, I will be honest, rather more interesting than anything else that had happened in the accounts room in the preceding several years. I said, what is your full assessment of the timber account? She opened to the third marker. We talked for another hour. She came back the following Tuesday, at my request, though I had framed it with a dignity I will not pretend to in retrospect, as being about the estate accounts. It was about the estate accounts. It was also about Miss Elspeth Crane, who had walked into my accounts room with a ledger and an error list, and the unhurried conviction that she was correct, and who had been, in all three instances, entirely correct. She came back the Tuesday after that, and the one after that. By June her father was recovering, and Pell had mentioned to me, with the particular delicacy of a man who has worked for me long enough to be direct without being obvious, that the upstairs staff had noticed the twice-weekly account sessions and were drawing certain conclusions. I told Pell that the upstairs staff could draw whatever conclusions they liked, as the accounts had improved materially and the discrepancy issue had not recurred. Pell said, "Yes, Your Grace." He said it in a way that meant something else. I asked Miss Crane to attend the Midsummer Assembly at Wentford in July. I framed it as an estate matter. She had been corresponding with the Wentford steward on behalf of her father, and she accepted with the same practical courtesy she brought to everything, and arrived in a dress that was better than the gray, but still plainly that of a steward's daughter, and spent the first hour in conversation with the Wentford land manager about drainage. The Duke of Alderthwaite said to me during the interval, "Is that your steward's girl?" I said, "That is Miss Crane, whose quarterly reviews have corrected 11 shillings of overpayment and a timber account that had been drifting for 3 years. He said, "She's not what I expected." I said, "No, she is considerably more than expected." I said it plainly, in company, in a tone that settled something. Alderthwaite heard it. Miss Crane, across the room, was explaining the drainage problem to the Wentford steward with the focused confidence of someone who has done the research. She did not look at me. I doubt she heard it. She did not need to. The statement was for the record that says, "This is the woman I have invited to stand in my company, and she is exactly what I said, and I intend for everyone present to understand that." I proposed in September. She asked me with genuine curiosity rather than coyness whether I had considered the difficulty of the difference in our stations. I told her that I had considered very little else for several months, and that I had found the conclusion unchanged. She said, "I will want to continue the accounts work." I said, "That was assumed." She said, "Then yes." We were married in November. Her father walked her in. Pell had reorganized the accounts room with 2 desks, which he had done without being asked, sometime in October. He was in that respect, as in most others, ahead of me.